So we're here to discuss the 4-year anniversary of Rock Band as a franchise. So put yourself where you were 4 years ago. November 20th was when Rock Band 1 came out, so we're shortly before launch. What were you feeling at that time?
Oh, well, the short answer is I have no idea. I don't remember it all. But if I were to fabricate something, sure. The main thing I remember about the launch period was, like, Rock Band was like the biggest thing we had ever bitten off, and it had all these new components, that, like things that we had never done before. Specifically, the hardware, because we had designed it kind of in-house from the ground up. We hired an industrial designer, and we had this, manufacturing liaison specialist in China, and we sent Daniel Sussman to China to figure out how to make plastic guitars and so forth. And we were like completely terrified, that this stuff would come off the boats in time and that it would work properly. And so most of it, what I remember, was this mad scramble about wrapping up all the little details of like all the different things that had to be in the big box, and was just consumed with that, basically, just trying to make sure that the launch wasn't like a smoking hole, that we would actually get the stuff to market and that people would be able to play it.
Was it a process of sort of like learning something new every week? Like, we'd never manufactured anything, especially on this scale, to learn this whole new portion of manufacturing and getting it out on time with the game.
Yeah, I mean, just the degree of, it was all in the service of this kind of mad plan where it was like, hey, it's fun to be in a rock band. Let's make a game where, we knew that the basic mechanic worked because we had worked on Guitar Hero and that had seen success already. But, just trying to capture that sense, because, myself, among like many folks here, like we either were in bands or are in bands, and there's just something so special about that, just everybody like cranking away together at high volume, and that sort of camaraderie, that's really just in the moment. It's such a special thing, and I think we had that shared passion of trying to capture that and bring it to a bigger audience. But it was really not at all clear that it would work. And then a lot of it just in terms of bringing it to market, like the design, I thought we had to cut some stuff late. There was this hope that we would have a much deeper sort of online interaction. Like, it's funny, it seems weird in retrospect, but it wasn't obvious to us, I think, at the time, that it was going to be a party game and there was going to be this like social thing. I think we had this vision of it as like people would have virtual bands online and and meet up with their online friends, all of which kind of happened to some degree, but not nearly. That wasn't really ended up the focus. It ended up being much more sort of social, party, family kind of thing. I don't actually remember the question. Oh, you were asking me about what it was like to ship it. Yeah, so so the game actually came together, and I think we were proud of the game and so forth. And then it was really, in terms of what I was thinking about, it was all logistics. It was like stuff. There was all these like crazy little things that had to be dealt with, like the I think it was the drums. We needed. Hang on, I'll remember it. There was like issues about like how much current the peripherals could draw from the Xbox, and if it was over the limit, then you needed an AC adapter, which had to be UL listed, and that was like a whole process. And in fact, they drew more milliamps of current than the Xbox could sustain, so we needed, and we wanted to be wireless, but the wireless chipset wasn't complete yet. Like there wasn't an Xbox wireless chipset that you could use, So the Xbox could be wireless, although some of the other, I think there was the PS3 was wireless out of the gate, wasn't it?
That's right.
Yeah. So but then there was issues with the boxes because some had to have wires and AC adapters and others didn't. And anyway, it was that was it for me. It was like solving tons of tiny little problems that we didn't even know existed until we dug into it.
And your role at Harmonix, was it such that you had to be overseeing GH2 while you were also overseeing Rock Band's development, or were you sort of just on one?
Not directly, because that was the last game that we did here where I wore two hats, where I was like, heading up product development and also the project director on Rock Band, which was difficult. But Guitar Hero 2 was Daniel Sussman was heading that up, and that was actually ran incredibly smoothly, is my recollection. Is I would play it occasionally, but it was that it ran really smooth. It was like one of the least problematic titles we've ever shipped out of here. Like, it went great.
So what was it like for you to have to create a game that competed with a franchise you had already created?
Well, like, people asked us about that. It's like, oh, what was it like to do, Rock Band, Guitar Hero, and then we did Rock Band and so forth. And in the moment, I mean, it's like life, kind of like hands you a hand, and then you like play the hand you're dealt, and that was just the way it was. Like, we didn't own the Guitar Hero IP, and when that became valuable, it got purchased by Activision, and it became pretty apparent that we didn't want to, that it wasn't. Like, developing that for them was not the best use of our time, and then MTV got interested in us and so forth. So I think for me, like, my attitude was like, hey, okay, we have this opportunity to take it to the next level and make this game, like the Rock Band game, which really was, for me so much, like, it had so many more aspects of, like, it covered so much more ground than Guitar Hero, which was cool, but it was really just about, this kind of guitar simulator thing. Whereas, like, Rock Band, not only did it do vocals and drums and bass, but all the interactions between them. So it was a much bigger design space and much more interesting. And so, like, I think my attitude, and I think generally our attitude, was just like, oh, we had an opportunity to do it. We described it. We pitched it to MTV. They said, sure, let's do it, and off we went.
Can you say if you were was the initial plan for the next Guitar Hero game after GH2 to have been a full band game anyway, if you were going to continue with that franchise?
It must have been. I mean, I think that like I don't actually remember is the honest answer. I remember, like, as early as possible, we started working on drum gameplay because it seemed obvious that we should come up with drum gameplay. But I think in terms of the franchise and the brand and how it was, I think that was like all stuff that we figured out after the fact. I think there was a time period where we were even thinking about, like, maybe there's Drum Hero, and there's not a band game, that we like figure out drum gameplay and it's a standalone thing. We glue them together later. It's there was all kinds of different ideas that bounced around, and the timeline about how they came together is lost to me.
Cool. So was there a point in development when you achieved that goal of, like, you said sort of the idea with Rock Band was the fun of playing together as a band? Was it pretty apparent from the beginning, or was there a moment, like, further into development that it finally started clicking and you're like, oh my god, this is fun, I'm playing with a guitar player and a drummer and a singer?
Yes, there was. I don't know if there was a moment, but I remember a process that went from, like, it not being fun to it being fun, where early on there was a lot of issues, because the first thing, we built the drums, and then we already had some sort of design insights about vocals because we did the karaoke games for Konami earlier on, that we glued it all together, right, where we had the 4 kind of track types and we could hook up 4 controllers and so forth. And I remember there was a period early on, like when we first switched it on, it was pretty obvious that it was like 4 solo games that had no relationship to each other. It was like 4 people staring at the screen in the same room, but it wasn't a band. And then we had all this design work to do to figure out how to glue them together. How to make people aware of each other and how to, like, have a shared experience. And then once we did that work and it started to become a shared experience, then I think we started to get excited.
Great. Can you recall, was there an initial pitch for Rock Band that you can remember how you reacted to that? Or was it just always sort of the natural progression from what you were doing?
Oh, I think it was completely natural. It was like, this is the next step, okay, the Guitar Hero thing, okay, people seem to be willing to buy that. What else can we do in this space? Oh, rock bands, those are cool. Drums are cool. We should be able to figure that out. Let's just keep going and to try to turn it into the whole thing.
And there was no discussion of any other vastly different project you could have done at the point after you joined MTV Games? Was there ever any discussion like, oh, we could do this totally different idea, or we could do Rock Band? Or was it always just, we're going to do Rock Band?
It's funny because I'm a little hesitant because I you know because other people could have like more accurate memory of it than me, and like my memory of it is not particularly accurate. But what I seem to remember was that it was always going to be Rock Band, and that was kind of what we were talking to MTV about while they bought us. Like that's kind of like why they bought us, or you know, and that might not actually be true, but that's my memory of it. Is that we're like, hey, you should buy us, and then we'll do this Rock Band game, and it'll be awesome, you know. And that they, you know, they got excited about that.
Cool, makes sense. So can you say how the decision was arrived upon to give the oversight of this entire giant manufacturing mechanism to Dan Sussman?
Let's see. How did Daniel get the manufacturing gig? I don't know. It's like a lot of stuff that happens here. He was available. He was committed. You know, and he did an awesome job on Guitar Hero 2, and he had basically done an awesome job on everything we gave him up to that point. And you know, he was unmarried and willing to travel to China, and you know, so it was pretty much like you get on a plane, go figure it out, which he did. You know, to his enormous credit, you know, he actually went like knowing zero about manufacturing, and you know, he and John Hayes and Andy, all those guys, and you know, and then subsequently, you know, Todd and Matt Bach and so forth. It's like we went from nothing to like a very impressive little industrial design organization that like made millions and millions and millions of plastic instruments.
Cool. So a lot of crazy things have happened during the lifespan, the ongoing lifespan of the Rock Band franchise. Everyone kind of has at least one good story. I wonder if you have any good stories you can recall from things that maybe you were able to do or see because of Rock Band that otherwise you never would have.
There was a weird thing that happened, and I don't even know if this is probably going to like not make the final cut. But for me, it was significant because like I spent 10 years in a band, you know, with Eric Brocious, our audio director, and some other folks. And, you know, so I played live a lot. I went on tour and so forth. And when we debuted Rock Band with Peter Moore on stage at E3 at the Microsoft Press event, you know, which it was like I don't know, there was probably a few thousand people there. It was a big amphitheater, and with all the accoutrements, there was a green room and PA and, you know, monitors and so forth, and all the hardware was like totally cobbled together. It was like all like early prototype stuff that was highly flaky, barely worked. And I remember backstage, you know, it's like it was time for us to go. We did the rehearsal, and it was time for us to go on. And I totally reverted into like stage mode where I had all these, you know, little mannerisms, like, you know, little ticks, like Nomar used to like check his like gloves like 8 times every time he went up to bat, because I'd like have to go to the bathroom and have to wash my hands, and you know, I had to do all these things, you know, and to get all the things out of my pockets. And I like just kicked into like autopilot. It was like, you know, everything came out of the pockets. Where do I put all my stuff? You know, and I just did my pre-stage routine. I was like, well, wait, I'm playing a plastic guitar at a trade show, but it didn't matter. It was exactly the same experience, you know.
And then what came out of that was the term "to Peter Moore."
Yeah, that's right, because he like, you know, through no fault of his own, really, I hit the pause button, I guess, or. I think that's what happened.
It was either he hit the pause or the guide button or something.
Yeah.
Mid song.
Yeah, and the whole thing shut down.
Which at this point I think happens every year at Microsoft's E3 event. Right? It happened last year, I think, with Call of Duty, and I think it's to be expected now.
Right, something.
We
something
set the
goes
trend.
wrong.
That's pretty good. Were you there for the famous Who show?
I was there for the Who show, and that was pretty great. Yeah, that was a good show.
First time they'd done a theater gig in like 30 or 40 years or something, right?
Yeah, and I think the impression I got, like as the show progressed, is like it was kind of a money gig for them. You know, I think they were well paid to do that show, and you know, a few songs in, they realized that it was like a legit show, that the audience was into it. You know, it wasn't like a corporate gig that was a, you know, rock and roll show, and then they delivered. It was great.
Yeah, they're only supposed to play like a pretty short set, right? And they ended up doing a full set.
Yeah, they they basically did like a complete Who concert, and engaged with the audience, and so it was very special. It was really fun.
What did you think of? I know the outspoken Pete Townsend had something to say about our guitar design, our Fenders. Do you remember?
I think I think what his comment was that the button colors were ugly. That he didn't approve of the button colors. So that's his prerogative.
So throughout the development of any of the Rock Band games, including the Beatles Rock Band, can you recall any stories during the development time that might be interesting to people? Like, just from day to day being here, there's always something interesting in making our games that people never end up knowing. But it's like sometimes it can be like a major design change. Sometimes it can be like a major bug that could have crashed everything. And I don't know if you have any recollections there.
I'm trying to think of. I can try to just like rattle off a few things, and
Sure.
I remember this kind of like slightly entertaining aspect. This was actually all the way to Rock Band 3, where the art team had done pretty much every last rock and roll item of clothing that they could possibly think of, which with this deep catalog of hats and jeans and shirts and all, including like totally outlandish things. And so they approached me and Daniel, who's project director on that title, and said, okay, can we start to move into sort of like but the thing, one of the guiding principles of the art direction of the game up to that point was like that it had to be pretty authentic rock and roll, like that anything you'd see on the stage in terms of clothing or whatever was realistic. And so they kind of showed up, the art team said, well, can we break that rule now? It's Rock Band 3, can we start to go in a weirder direction? And so we had a little meeting, and so we were like, well, what do you have in mind? And so they had two proposals. They said, well, we'd like to do a robot arm. And they showed that, the arm, the prototype of the arm, and it was like pretty cool. And then the other thing that they proposed was goat legs, like satanic goat legs. And it was like Ryan and me, and I think Daniel and Paul Lyons, who was like championing these things. And for whatever like convoluted like reasoning, I was like, okay, yes to the robot arm and no to the goat legs. To which his response was, robot goat legs? Would that work?
Oh my God. That's amazing. That is a good story. See, you were able to come up with one right off the bat. Do you have any others?
Let me see if I get anything else. Yeah, so this might sure. Here's a Beatles one, which may or may not make the cut, but like certainly struck me at the time was a really interesting thing. Was one of the things that was the most difficult about that is like we had to engage with the Beatles. And who were not, this was like a big step for them. They weren't in the habit of licensing their IP to really very many people at all, let alone a video game company. And we had to do a lot of work to convince them that we were going to do justice to the Beatles. And it was really to properly model and animate the Beatles in a way that worked in the game, but was also true to them in some sense, was really at the limit of our artistic and technical abilities. It was a very difficult challenge. And I remember there was a day where like Yoko came to visit because she had to sign off on John's likeness and basically how we treated John and so forth. And and kind of her reputation precedes her. Let's see, what could you say about Yoko? That she seemed like kind of a fierce person, I guess. And so we were pretty apprehensive, and she came in, and she was very blunt. In point of fact, the version of John that we had at that point was not that great. He had posture issues, there was animation issues. It was, he wasn't really in shape to ship, and she was pretty blunt about all the things that were wrong with John, which was like, I think, emotionally difficult for the team to take, but it was totally fair. Like everything she had to say was fair. It was all like very well considered feedback and incredibly valuable. And so then we went and fixed all those problems, and then she looked at it again, and she was happy. And so that was pretty satisfying. You know, I was not directly involved with it. I was sort of watching from afar, but like pretty satisfying to watch, you know, just the team step up in this very challenging assignment, you know, working with this iconic personality, you know, who like really didn't pull any punches, but had, you know, but really gave us terrific feedback that we were able to use to like do a good job, which I think we did do a good job. I think it came out great, and I'm, you know, really proud of it.
Cool. So I have to ask, you have worked on a number of what I consider landmark games for gaming, not just at Harmonix, and your previous work at Looking Glass as well with System Shock and Thief and all those.
Mm-hmm.
Do you? So at this point, you're seasoned veteran.
I guess so.
So through all these successful titles that you've worked on, have you been able to pinpoint what makes a game, not talking about financially successful, but what makes a great game?
Oh.
Like, is there an essence that you're able to
I would say, like, well, well, so two things like spring to mind. Like, one is like Alex has this poster in his office, which I love, which is this rip-off of the old English. Apparently, there was these posters during the war in England, which apparently then it was never up. It came out after the war, but anyway, they said keep calm and carry on, right? That there were these little like colored posters that they had designed to keep the populace, you know, to try to boost the English people's morale while they were being bombed and so forth. And now I guess there's this whole cottage industry of people like mutate those. And Alex's says, get excited and make things. And in any of the really successful game teams that I've been on, been this sense, which like you continue to think of like is the most important thing that, you know, that I do here or that anybody does here is like just to be excited about like making something, which is that same, you know, that same impulse to like when you're like 9 years old and you're making a fort in your backyard and it's like, yes, we're gonna make a fort, and when we do it, it's gonna be awesome. You know, and I still feel like that every day about that. It's like every game that we work on that's, you know, that's healthy and successful, it's because the people on it are like, yeah, like they can't wait to play the game that they're making, you know.
Awesome.
So that would be the one thing is just like having that, just like, you know, just like showing up every day, wanting desperately to build something that'll be just like really fun to play, and then not putting up with something that's not good enough, right? That's like if it's deficient, like continuing just to work and work and work on it until you run out of time and money, at which point you got to push it out the door. But really trying hard, which I think is something that we do really well, that people here like really care about making, like doing the best they can to make it really good, you know, as hard as that can be. And the other thing that you know seems important to me is like something I learned from this guy Doug Church, who was at Looking Glass, and you know who I learned a lot from, was this this intuitive thing of just always trying to put yourself in the player's shoes. So if you're designing a game, it's like you're always thinking about like, I'm the player, what's happening to me now? I'm having fun, I'm disappointed, I'm frustrated, oh, there's a challenge, I understand this, I don't understand that, you know, which it took me a long time, it took me a long time to learn that. A lot of my early sort of naive attempts at game development was like, oh, I'll think of a big set piece and it'll be awesome, and I think it's awesome, you know, without really thinking about what it would be to encounter it. And that's like you know, when I see like, you know, younger people, you know, that have like even like really great ideas, like that's a thing that seems like it takes time to figure out. It's like the not obvious thing that you can think of something like really cool, but it ends up being sort of unplayable because it's, you know, because I think the game experience is all, it's like you encounter something new and then in moment to moment you're sort of discovering it and you're walking this line between, you know, accomplishing something that's challenging and you want it to be challenging, but you want people, if they fail at it, to immediately think, oh, I could have done that and I'm going to do it again because I know I can do it. It's just because I just learned the little thing I needed to learn to go back and have a success at it. You know, so people are always like surfing that line between success and failure, you know, and that that's the essence of great game design. It's really, but for you to do that well, you have to always put yourself like in the head of the guy playing the game, you know, as you think about it, and that's what gives you the insights you need to make good games.
Cool, great answer. So we'll start wrapping up. So you've worked a lot with Alex and Iran over the years. Have you seen any change in them since the launch of Rock Band and its subsequent success?
Oh, since the launch of Rock Band?
Or just over your tenure here?
I've been here so long, you know. It's like the thing is, this was a very young company when I showed up. I think the thing that strikes me, like thinking about that, is just like we've all sort of grown together in a way, but I'm like older than those guys by about a decade, you know. So I was already in my mid-30s when I showed up, and they were in their mid-20s, and it was really astonishing to watch them both in their own separate ways evolve into like complete badasses, you know, in terms of just becoming these like just monsters of both business development and game development. Which was just, you know, it's been a great ride.
Cool. So here's some Rock Band specific stuff. Have you, being a musician, I'm sure you're very opinionated about music and what music you like and such. But do you have any band or genre that you've gained an appreciation for because of Rock Band, because of playing Rock Band, that you otherwise maybe wouldn't have?
Well, so I guess my answer to that would be the thing that. I think this has happened to a lot of people. It certainly happened to me. I've gained a lot of appreciation into musical parts, where like you listen to something, you listen to some, I don't know, it could be like Fall Out Boy or something, some, you know, random song by some random band, and then you play the drum part, and you're like, oh, this is really interesting. It's like somebody put a lot of inventiveness and work into the, you know, like the craft of this specific part, and how they vary. Here's a good example: is playing like the Keith Moon parts in Who songs. You listen to the Who and you're like, yeah, the drums are kind of flamboyant, you know, whatever, you know. And then you play the part and you're like, oh my God, every bar is different. Like it's just through composed end to end. Every single bar is different. Wow, that's amazing. Like that, I did not really know. And then the other obvious example is all the Paul McCartney bass lines from the Beatles. It's like ridiculous. You know, all the just melodic invention and the little permutations and just the, you know, just the compositional power, you know, of what he was able to come up with. You know, they're just so much better than, you know, obviously he's Paul McCartney, so, you know, he's like, you know, it's not like anybody needs me to explain to them that Paul McCartney's good or anything, but it's just a personal revelation to play those bass lines and realize just like how amazing they are.
Yeah, I think that was for a lot of people. I don't know if it was an interview or whether it was someone here that talked to him, but wasn't there a story where someone actually brought that point up to him, that people are now like actually really gaining an appreciation for his bass lines, and he thought that was really cool? Did you ever hear that?
I don't know if I actually did hear that.
Oh, yeah.
I hope it's true, because, you know, I mean, you know, because that would be a nice outcome, you know, because I think that's probably true for people who are paying attention. It's like, you know, so that to me is the thing. Not so much for like specific bands. I think. Well, the other thing that happened to me, and I think a lot of people, is, you know, we would choose these soundtracks for the discs very carefully and try to spread them across different genres and eras and so forth. And there would always be a few things on there that like I wasn't really familiar with, and then you get immersed in them and realize that they're amazing. You know, and that was one of my favorite things about Rock Band, actually, which I think people started to figure out over the years. Is it's not. Like early on, people were like, you know, the kind of thoughtful fans were like, oh, I like this one because it's got like a lot of songs I like, and then a few songs that maybe I don't care about. And then in later years, people would be more like, no, I'm really looking forward to the whole thing because all the songs that I didn't know, I now love. Like people started to view it as a vehicle for them to learn about new music, which was, you know, super satisfying for us.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite moment playing Rock Band or seeing people play Rock Band?
I am pretty fond of the Big Rock ending, because that was this thing I think was all the way back to Guitar Hero. Like I wanted to jam that into Guitar Hero, and it didn't fit, and there was no space and so forth. But I remember like advocating very early on. It's like, and at the end, it's like everyone should just like hit all the instruments together, and like if we all hit the last note at the same time, we should get a big bonus. Like that just seemed like a great thing. And then sure enough, you know, it's like it took us a while to get it like figured out, I guess, how to do it visually and so forth. But that still remains to me like, you know, the coolest thing. Yeah. So anyway, I feel like a little pride of ownership of that feature because it just seemed like such a rock thing and the kind of thing that would pull a band together, you know, like a live performance, you know, thing. And then, you know, it took quite a while to actually work it all out, and it ended up being great. Oh, the other thing that worked out great that I think Eric Brocious came up with this is my recollection, but is that, hey, if you're doing really well, people should sing along. And that was actually a lot of work, right? We had to like go to a studio and, you know, have, you know, like tons of overdubs and so forth. And sure enough, it's like when those moments in the game, I love those moments, you know, where suddenly the audience sings along. And it emotionally is, you know, really works for me.
Yeah. Fish, I'm done with my questions. Do you have any extras that I might have missed or that you want to ask?
I was just curious, you were here from the beginning, and what was it like as Rock Band was ramping up, really building that team of all these people? This was like their first job out of school, and just willing to work out of their enthusiasm, whether they were testing or they were young artists or producing. What was it like to kind of, you know, have your pick at all these talented young people to help push this new kind of game out the door?
Oh,
I know you were a big part of that, not necessarily this one and this one.
I was, you know, the honest answer is I was pretty decoupled from that because, like, in terms of recruiting those people and dealing with them, it was like Ryan and, you know, and you know, Eric Malafew and, you know, like all the, cause we were already big enough at that point so that, like, all that energy was happening at the departmental level. I do remember it was like very much this thing, like in retrospect, it seems astonishing that we pulled it off, you know, because we really did this thing where we went from making games of, you know, about this size to making a game of like, this, you know, was way bigger in all these different respects, and how hard that was. I remember, that was like, I think as close as we've come at Harmonix to a death march, like that, like the Rock Band 1 was harsh, you know, getting it done on time was not easy. And the other thing I remember was, and because EA was distributing it, and so they were pretty involved, you know, and they had placed a pretty big bet on it, and they were very concerned that it like ship on time. And there was this whole, and we were like, I think our QA was very good, and very tightly integrated with development, and we had this this dynamic where they had sent senior producers here pretty late, you know, it was like, you know, well into beta, and they had all these charts about like, oh, here's your bug count and here's your projected trajectory, and you're not shipping until next February. You know, it's like, you're not going to make your dates. It's like, it's, you know, it's not going to happen. We're like, no, it's good. Trust us, it'll be fine. They're like, you know, but the charts that clearly state that you're not going to do it. And we did, right? It's like at some point, it's like we rallied and our bug count just fell off a cliff. It just like trended like down incredibly steeply. And we wrapped the thing, we buttoned it up and shipped it, and it was like actually good software. It was pretty bug free, and it, you know, it was, you know, it was quite a thing to watch this whole company just like rally under enormous pressure and just like just work miracles, just pull it together at the last minute. So that was fun, you know, and then go back to them and say, you see, you know, and then they didn't bother us after that. So that was kind of fun.
Cool. That's great. Yeah, I think we're good.